Welcome back to Second Nature. I am joined by Wylie Robinson from Rumpl, the co-founder, the man. You made Rumpl happen. You have created this brand and you've been at it for what, 12 years now?
Yeah, this is year 12.
Very exciting. Honestly, I think the real thing we need to do today is build sort of the roadmap for all the entrepreneurs in the outdoor industry. We should talk through everything you've kind of gone through. Maybe this will be sort of like a therapeutic session a little bit, but I think it would be really fun to dig into all the decisions, all the twists and turns along the way, maybe great decisions that were made, maybe decisions that you in hindsight would do differently given the chance. And also maybe some of just like the cool highlights. I know you were on like Shark Tank, you sent a blanket to space, like you've done some really cool stuff. And I want to tap into sort of everything that you've learned over the past decade plus running an outdoor business, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs or people that want to become entrepreneurs in the outdoor space that could learn from kind of exactly what you've experienced. I think that's
all right.
that's
the vision. Yeah. Plenty of things that hopefully I can help people avoid. So that's one thing I locked onto from your intro there.
Very cool. I mean, I've got to imagine tons and tons of decisions. I mean, on a daily basis, the amount of decision making that must go into running a company like this, and then multiply that over a decade of those decisions. So much goes into it. I know the founding story, but I'd love for the people that aren't familiar, how did Rumpl come to be?
Sure. I'll try to be succinct on this, but in 2012, a friend and I were on a road trip. We both worked at creative agencies at the time, and we were on a road trip in California, and the plan was to drive down the coast, surfing all the way down, and then head east and drive back up to San Francisco, where we lived, skiing on the way back up. And we did the whole downward part. Surf was great, headed east into the mountains. And first night we were in the mountains, it was like the coldest night on record, just outside Mammoth, and froze the car, wouldn't start. And we had to sit in our car and wait around for someone to show up. We ended up waiting for 6-7 hours. And while we were doing that, we were in our sleeping bags trying to stay warm. And we got to talking about how we both loathed putting comforters into duvet covers, because like we were in our sleeping bags, we were warm and comfy. We were like, man, why didn't somebody make a blanket out of sleeping bag materials? That would just be so much easier than dealing with these comforters going in there. And like, it's just this little sort of like passing comment while we were just talking about all sorts of stuff. But we came out of that and got back to San Francisco eventually, obviously. And we were like, man, remember that idea? That was like kind of an interesting idea. Probably the next time we had washed our comforter, and we're dealing with that again. And we thought, okay, let's make this thing. And so we made these sleeping bag blankets just out of fabric that we got at a local fabric store. We made 2 of them. And that was kind of the end of the idea. Like there was no business ambition that came out of this. And in San Francisco, a lot of the time, you go out into the park for concerts or like just to do stuff out in the city. And we would end up bringing these things off of our beds and out into the world with us. And a bunch of our friends were like, oh, this is a cool idea. I'd like to try one of these things. And this was when Kickstarter was like just getting going. And there was a guy who had just like raised $70,000 to make potato salad. It was like, you couldn't lose doing Kickstarter. So we were like, all right, let's try a Kickstarter. And we ended up doing, $250,000 of sales through Kickstarter in 30 days with this, sleeping bag blanket concept. And we were like, oh my God, what is this? And we did kind of take a step back while that was all happening. We were like, what is this idea? Why do this many people want this thing? And it dawned on us that blankets as a category has this like massive addressable market, right? Like everybody uses blankets, and there was no interesting brand in this space at all. Like it's one of those things where every household has 5, 10, 15 blankets in it. And if you ask someone, name one blanket brand, you might get Pendleton maybe in the Northwest here, but outside of that, it's like people buy a blanket at Target or, a department store or something like that. And there's no brands that have any interesting storytelling or community building or anything like that. And the irony there is that the way you use a blanket to wrap up to feel warm and comfy and cozy and safe is like this really emotive experience you have with the product. And so there's this perfect opportunity to tie storytelling, emotional connection, community building, whatever it may be that kind of draws you in on a psychological level with this inherent really emotive product experience. And so it was like, man, there's just like so much opportunity with this massive market, tell cool stories through art, color, materials, sustainability. And that was like the kernel that we built off of for the first, 8 years of Rumpl. And the mission has evolved since then. Originally, it was just really focused on blankets, hyper focused. We've expanded our product assortment since then, but the general idea is still there that we want to find and create products that have big addressable markets and upgrade them with performance textiles and also really emotive, interesting, immersive storytelling.
I want to go back to that moment where you just started seeing the, up and to the right chart on Kickstarter. I mean, what was that experience like? Was it, I mean, obviously it validated your idea, like, oh, more people than just our friend group want this. But was there ever like a level of, fear? I mean, oh my God, I have to now figure out how to produce $250,000 worth of this product that I just hand sewed. Now what? You had an experience working at agencies, which I don't know. Tell me more about that. Maybe it was like a graphic design thing or something like that. But like production of a hard good like that, were you freaked out a little bit of like, oh my God, what do we do?
100%. Yeah. I mean, just to double click on what the agencies were, I was working at a branding agency and specifically in the branded environments group. So I had sort of this hybrid, like graphics, brand systems, physical space design background. And my co-founder was working at a product design and engineering company. So his agency
sort of a dream team setup, actually. Like if you think back to it, like you did have like some product design and engineering chops.
He did for sure.
And also, you guys together also then had the branding and just, physical space. Like it's actually a pretty good setup for launching a company. Actually, it's not like,
I definitely think so in hindsight. I mean, there are definitely some areas that we had big gaps in, which we can get into later, but I mean, he kind of led the charge on like finding an overseas manufacturer, production at scale, early fulfillment and operations. And I was more kind of front end, I guess, marketing, creative, content, voice, brand system. But yeah, I mean, to go back to your original question, yeah, it was totally intimidating. Like I had no idea how to manufacture anything overseas. I definitely had no idea how to fulfill anything. Originally, we thought if we got any orders, we would just fulfill these out of our apartments. But that obviously kind of went out the window in like a couple days. We had a couple hundred orders. And so we had to look up finding a 3PL. And I didn't know what that was, obviously, but look up finding like a logistics provider and just all the kind of back end stuff that I was just really naive to when we launched the Kickstarter.
It does sound like a bit of a gift that you had such a resounding success on Kickstarter that it forced you into setting this up, because had you been able to fulfill those orders out of your apartment, do you think you would have, made the decision to build it up into something that was legit with 3PL, with, all these other elements, manufacturing setup, all that stuff? It's almost like it pushed you over the edge. So you had to get serious about it. You couldn't be just kind of like sewing blankets every weekend and fulfilling orders. It sort of forced you to professionalize, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds on this, actually. I think if you just barely hit a Kickstarter goal or a early sales goal, and you do end up doing all the fulfillment yourself, you do gain a skill set that I actually have never really been hands-on for. So I've never actually been the one printing out shipping labels and sending boxes out my house and receiving returns. You hear about a lot of these startup stories where people do that, right? Like they literally start out of their own garage. They're sending the orders out of there. They're packing boxes. They're doing all that stuff. I never actually got that hands-on experience because it was just immediately at scale. Like our first batch of orders was something like 16 or 1700 orders. And sure, we could have fulfilled that, but like the space that our product takes up, it would have, we needed at least 1500 square feet. And so actually really more than that. I mean, just the product alone probably took about 1500 square feet. And so it was just not really feasible for us without getting some sort of external warehouse space. that's one side. The other side is, yeah, I mean, it throws you in the deep end. And so you have to learn these systems right from day one. And they're subscale, right? Like they're not fully scaled out systems to where we are now, but we did have to work with a vendor, negotiate terms, understand how each touch at the warehouse costs us money, try to optimize that. It's like things that you don't really think about that you just kind of get thrown into the deep end on. And so there's benefits to going both ways. I would say if you're doing Kickstarter and you just barely meet your goal, you probably would want to question what was maybe a little off on either your product, your pricing, whatever it may be, because I think if you just barely hit your goal, you may have kind of an uphill battle to find market demand after that.
Yeah, that product market fit is sort of everything, right? Like getting the product right. We recently did a podcast with Brian from Hollow Socks, and it was really like, don't worry about brand in the beginning, just worry about having the product right. And then, he even said, don't worry about brand until you hit, 5-10 million in revenue.
He's doing like crazy Facebook revenue, right?
Yeah.
I was
cranking. And it really became more about like just product, which makes sense to me. Like get your product right, get that product market fit. And when that's resonating, then, pour the fuel on the fire and go from there. But what was that step like? Because you've got the validation from the Kickstarter thing, you've got the orders to fulfill, but you can't go back to Kickstarter for the next iteration of that. So that transition from, okay, we validated this idea, we had this sort of like direct line to people that would support us and give us money up front. But the next step for you must have been, oh, now we have to pay for the next run of stuff. And then people will have to buy it out of our, out of a warehouse. So we're going to have to front the cash for the next order of stuff. How did you manage sort of the transition going from pre-orders to first actual order as an official business?
Yeah, I don't even remember a lot of it, to be honest. It was kind of like a blackout period in my mind, but it was a lot. I mean, we immediately flew over to Asia. We had to find a new manufacturer. We had our single prototype that we shot our Kickstarter video with. That was done by one manufacturer. Their pricing and quality, frankly, was like not really workable for us, but we knew that we could find something that was more feasible. And so we immediately went to Asia and found a different manufacturer. So we had to get them online. I mean, that was like a huge body of work in and of itself. Another thing that happened to us, and I'm sure this happens to a lot of people that launch businesses that have some traction right away, is we just got hit up by like retailers and, Amazon vendors and international distributors and, some big department stores that wanted to bring the product on, and like figuring out sort of what your distribution plan is and, your just figuring out how you want your brand to show up is like, you're just getting so much influx and inbound interest that it's really hard to both be opportunistic, but also be really discerning about who you're going to be selling to and where you're going to be sold. And so there was just like a ton of noise that happened to us in the middle of that whole first order fulfillment process, in addition to finding a new supplier and bringing them online. So I just remember it being really chaotic, like so many cold emails just flooding into my inbox, trying to figure out which ones were worth responding to, which ones I should, respond politely to, but back burner. And it was just like really chaotic. I don't know if that answered your question fully, but it was just a whirlwind. It's like you hit go on this Kickstarter, and then if it picks up, it's like immediately this barrage of interest starts and just stuff to do. And it becomes super taskless.
It's thinking back of having something that actually works. Like what happens if you actually get what you want, and it's not easy, right? So did you guys just, you're working in agencies and stuff, did you just instantly quit your jobs and like, oh, I guess we're doing this now? Or was there sort of a, hey, maybe I could do both things, I'm not sure if this is going to work? Like, what was the decision there for your actual career?
I was out of the agency right away. And my partner held on a little longer. And I think that was probably wise of him in one sense. I mean, there was no financial guarantee of what we were doing at that time. But at the same time, it did create some friction between the two of us, because it was like, hey, man, I'm all in on this. Like, are you all in or out? And eventually, he did resign from his agency, but it was probably 6 months or so after I did, and that did create like a little bit of a tension between us that ended up existing until we eventually split ways, and he's no longer in the business. But yeah, that was something that I pretty much decided right away. Like, I'm going all in on this, and this is what I'm doing, and I had this belief that the financial part would figure itself out. Um, yeah, it was hectic though. I mean, just like so much, just laundry list of stuff to do.
I mean, thinking about just getting giant orders and fulfilling inventory and setting up all the things that need to be set up, and all of those kind of first foundational elements that you have to get in place, I would imagine also took a lot of resources, not just time, but also money. How far into the business, you're working so hard on it, you quit your agency job, you see the success on the horizon. I'm like, oh, this is going to work. When did you feel actually like financially comfortable? Like, oh, this thing actually is working. Like, I'm going to be good. I made the right call. Have you had that moment yet? But like,
Well,
was there a point? Was there a point that sort of unlocked that for you? Where like, okay, this is going to work.
I would say there's two different timelines in this question. The first is, is there product market fit, and is the business viable? Does your product margin support actually making these things and selling them to consumers, and carving out some amount for marketing and some amount for fulfillment? And like, does the mechanics of the underlying business work out? And then the second is, when can I start paying myself and actually carving out a little bit of salary from the proceeds that we're getting from this business? And the first one, just the underlying mechanics of the business, happened relatively quickly. We always had strong product margin. We were able to be profitable just after that first Kickstarter fulfillment, which I think that's actually pretty rare, because a lot of people completely grossly underestimate fulfillment costs and, just all the things that go into fulfilling a huge batch of orders like that. So we had good underlying mechanics from day one. And that part, I was not really very financially savvy at all before starting this business. And so that was like a pretty steep learning curve for me, is to just understand a P&L. But we got there, and that part made sense relatively quickly, I would say. We didn't actually start paying ourselves until 2 years in. We didn't take any salaries at all. And so, I mean, we were both single guys living in, apartments, and just like real lean lifestyle. And that made it possible. I think that if I were to do it now with kids and, a mortgage and everything, it would have been way harder to last that long without paying ourselves. So that's a big thing that people should consider, is just like, what's your runway? And for us, we ended up finally taking very modest salaries about 2 years in, even after a pretty successful first start.
That's got to be a tricky point for just about anybody. Of, the conversation in your head is like, do I hold on to this job because it's sort of subsidizing the business and the work, and I don't have to worry about this actually turning a profit, that I can give myself a salary? But then the other conversation that's also happening in your head at the same time is like, but what if I could go all in on this thing, and I didn't have, a job to go to during the day? I could just focus on setting all this stuff and getting it. I don't know. I can say from my side of things, Parkinson's law is whatever time you have to work on something is what you're going to make it work, because I had this exact same conversation with myself when I dove into the content side of things. Like, oh, if I didn't have to sit on all these like lame Zoom calls about stuff I don't care about, and doing all this extra work that's paying the bills, but like it's a distraction from, getting my stuff off the ground. What if I could spend all that time working on my channel and making these videos? And then when I did that, I actually it took the same amount of time, and it was just as hard. So it's funny how those conversations can kind of go in your head for so long, of like, oh, if I had all this extra time, it's like that time evaporates somehow. I don't know, but
it totally evaporates. Yeah. Like I mentioned, like the early months, call it, of Rumpl, it was just like so many clerical to-dos. Setting up the business, registering this, setting up this account, doing this. I mean, setting up a social profile, like, responding to customer service, figuring out where we were going to ship, making product decisions. It was just endless tasks. And it wasn't strategic. It wasn't high level. It wasn't like 3-year sort of vision mapping. It was just like What's my 20 things I can get done today? And so, yeah, it is really easy to fall into the trap of like, if I just had 4 more hours of the day or 5 more hours of the day, I could get 25 things done instead of 20. But you're right. I mean, I think if you force yourself into a 4 hour window of things you can get done, then like you just need to be ruthless about prioritization. And it may have helped actually in the early days. We may have not spun our wheels on so many things, which we did plenty of, but it was because it felt like, okay, well, if we can get to this, we should get to it. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's tough to prioritize that though.
What did you think about prioritizing in those early days? Because, you know, we got 3PL set up, you got your manufacturer in Asia set up, like you've got all that stuff, but this is early days of Instagram and Facebook mm-hmm. ads and all that stuff. Were you thinking more about, you know, the retail discussion and getting this into distribution that way? Were you thinking more about direct to consumer? Like, how are you thinking about just building a realistic business and getting it kind of on the shelves?
I think the number one priority was fulfilling Kickstarter on time and, you know, with high levels of satisfaction. So I did all the customer service stuff in the beginning, and it was like reaching out to all of these individual consumers or posting updates on Kickstarter that was like giving very clear information about any delays, any changes to expectations, all that. So I do think we made that the priority right off the bat, which was the right call. I mean, that is your customer base. Those are the people that are going to be advocates for you. It really doesn't matter where else you could sell the product until you fulfill that first order. I have heard of a couple of Kickstarter campaigns that went really well and then, you know, garnered a huge amount of demand from like a Target or a mass retailer. And then the business immediately shifts their prioritization to fulfilling those orders instead of the actual individuals that backed them. And that can go real sideways. So we were pretty ruthless about prioritizing those early backers, which was the right call. Now, we did get a huge amount of interest from third-party retailers at that time. And so we kind of, I mean, without any real retail experience on both sides, both of us didn't have this. We kind of did like the sniff test. You know, does this channel seem premium? Does it seem like they can tell our story? Do we think it's cool? We ended up doing a pretty good early partnership with Huckberry, just because we felt like it was on brand for what we were doing, on brand for us. As a San Francisco-based retailer, the founders were, you know, similar stage in life, similar story to ours, and it just kind of made sense. And that one worked really well. But yeah, there was a huge amount of distraction, I would call it now, looking in hindsight, from international distribution, kind of like discount online retailers, small little shops that, you know, would be very I guess high maintenance to manage and work with, even though they add value to the business and grow a community regionally. It would have just been a huge amount of effort for the return. So there's just like kind of an instinct there, I would say, in the beginning that we had to rely on.
So you've got something that, you know, you've nailed the product market fit. You've introduced a new idea into the world, specifically, I suppose, in outdoor, but even beyond that, I feel like it's probably resonating with people. I've got to imagine that other people were chasing you immediately with sort of knockoff products and stuff like that. What was that experience like? I've got to imagine there was somebody else that was like, oh, I can do that. I can make that. Did you have a lot of people
Shockingly, we didn't have a huge amount of competition for probably like 18 or 24 months. Wow. Even in the moment, I was shocked by that. And now that I know more about the speed to market with some of these factories, I'm even more surprised by that. We didn't see any competition from like real brands that were telling a story and had a unique value proposition until a few years in. The first knockoffs and competitors were direct from factory on Amazon, you know, half the price products. And we started finally seeing real competition from brands probably 2.5, 3 years in, which still blows my mind, actually. But now it's rampant, obviously.
Did you ever think about patenting it? Was this a patentable thing? I mean, how did you treat the IP?
It's not a patentable thing. That the IP that we do have on the product is our stitch lines. So our stitch lines are kind of a signature move that we have. They have a really distinct look. We do have that design trademarked. Now you could do a different swoopy, interesting, you know, kind of organic stitch line pattern and completely skirt the trademark we have. So it's not that strong of a protective provision, but it's at least something so you can identify like this is an authentic Rumpl if you care about that.
Okay, so we're kind of going through the first, you know, kind of the founding story in the first year or two of the brand. what's the advice that I'm sure lots of people are coming to you as more of an established founder when they're in this phase? What's the advice that you're giving out to people that are kind of going through this very first stage of finding product market fit, getting the business set up, getting sort of off the ground, really establishing themselves and their actions in these early days? How do you guide them?
The thing I always say, that I don't know if this is good or bad advice, but this worked for us, is we didn't look that far outside of what we thought was interesting and cool for this brand at that time. We didn't do consumer surveys. We didn't like really look at the consumer market or landscape and try to identify white space or something like that. It was like, do we think these products are cool? I mean, literally, me and Nick, my co-founder, do we think these products are cool? Would we want to buy these things? Okay, let's just focus on that. And the assumption, of course, was that if we thought they were cool, other people would think they were cool. And it sounds really simple and really obvious, but it makes your brand voice, your tone, your authenticity, all of your decisions get so simplified when maybe it's you and the founding team or you and the early team members are making things that you can all agree and align on as being the right things that the company should make. And again, that's like just a really simple piece of advice, but it really, I think, does streamline a lot of decision making. And you don't spin your wheels chasing things that you think maybe other consumers will want, or there's opportunity here that you don't fully inherently understand yourself as the nucleus of the business, but you're chasing because you think there's opportunity there. Later on, as the business scales, you can spend time doing that and identifying places to go and take the product line. But early on, it's just like, just do stuff that you understand and intimately know yourself.
Very cool. During that phase of the business, is there a key decision that you made that you either wish you would have made differently or that you're really, really proud of like, I'm so glad we went in this direction with this thing because it impacted things later? Is there sort of like, we're on the roadmap here, so I'm just trying to suss out.
Yeah, the key decision early on was the decision to focus on blankets. And there's like a whole lot to unpack with this decision, and it may be interesting, but I started with a co-founder. When I mentioned we were going through that growth period during Kickstarter, we kind of pulled back and said, okay, what is this thing people are interested in? And the original idea actually that came out of that was, I mentioned how blankets are emotive and you feel connected to them on this psychological level. And we actually thought at first that idea could span across a whole suite of home goods. And Rumpl was originally designed to be kind of like a home goods, quote unquote, brand, where we would take performance materials and apply them to everyday comfort items like blankets, bedding, sheets, towels, robes, slippers. We even had ideas for like furniture where you could, have it upholstered in, DWR coated textiles that would resist stains and all this stuff. And we came up with this idea for active homeware. And the thought was like, you'd go into like, Bed Bath and Beyond, which is now bankrupt, but you could go into like a big home goods store and there'd be like, your analog home goods and then your active homeware. And that was like the sort of original idea that we thought was the grounds to build a company off of. And my partner especially was like really, really into this idea of active homeware. And he was hiring designers and contractors to design us new product extensions into this new category we were thinking of creating. But meanwhile, our blanket sales were just continuing to fuel the business. This is, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ongoing. Like we just had to keep reinvesting any profits into increased POs. And eventually the decision that I kind of came to was like, dude, we're a blanket company. Like you got to get on board with this. There's plenty of addressable market with just this category that we've created, blankets. We don't need to expand the assortment so broad right now. Like let's grab market share in this new category. Let's create this category of technical blankets. And from there, maybe 4, 5, 6 years later, we can decide about what extensions might look like. And he was still really, really focused on this active homeware idea. And we had 2 employees at the time. This is about 24 months into the business. And it was kind of like all 3 of us thought that the path should be to focus and just really drive this blanket idea. And he didn't agree. And long story short, we parted ways. But I think that decision, I mean, it had a lot of consequence just in terms of the structure of the company. a co-founder leaving at the hands of this decision. But I think it was absolutely the right call for us because it allowed us, again, to just focus on the things that we knew and understood. And we could just really keep kind of a wall around our thinking for what we should be doing, how we should be talking to consumers, what the first message someone sees when they land on our website. And so that was a tough decision, and it had major consequences, that felt challenging to work through. But I think it was super positive for the early stages growth of the company. So that's what I'm proud of, even though it was really hard and caused a lot of, challenge that I had to navigate through.
Yeah. The focus in, this is the very clear winner, and there's still plenty of room. I mean, you continued on for another decade after that, continuing to innovate and create new stuff. There's artist collabs, there's all kinds of, there's so much space to continue to develop, even with the, sort of, I hesitate to say single product, but like an idea, like you
single
took that
category.
idea, and ran really far with it in so many different ways and sort of developed it out in all those different ways. I want to talk a little bit about investment, because obviously to fund POs, which for people listening that don't know what that stands for, it's purchase order. So basically when you order from the factory, like 1 million blankets, you're putting in a purchase order. Here's the money, make the thing, make it for us and send it over. Right. So you're trying to fund, POs as the business is continuing to grow, assuming the Kickstarter money essentially paid for that first batch of stuff. But then, thankfully you had healthy margins, but clearly to be able to grow at the level that you were growing, you needed to get investment. So what was that process for you? You came from an agency background. Getting into the investment game is dramatically different, I would imagine.
Yeah.
How did you go about sort of learning that process, and what were the steps that you took when you realized, like, hey, we need money to actually grow this business?
We didn't take on any money until about 2 years in. And by the way, this is right when everything was kind of coming to a head with my co-founder, and we were trying to focus our future roadmap on a single category. And so it was all coalescing at the same time, like building an investor deck on just one product rather than, this whole active homeware assortment. So that was like an initial piece of drama that was layered into this whole period. But yeah, we realized that we needed to raise a little bit of money, mostly to fund purchase orders. For the first 18, 24 months, we were funding purchase orders a lot of the time based off of promissory notes or promissory POs that we were getting from retailers. So we could go to a factory and say, hey, we've got this PO from a Huckberry, for instance, for $100,000. Can we get production made with terms against this PO? And that worked for a little while. So there were ways to basically get a loan from the factory to get those early products made. But when it comes to actually raising money, I didn't really know much. And so I actually turned to this platform. I don't know if they're still around. They're called Circle Up. And Circle Up is or was, I'm not sure, a platform that connects entrepreneurs to accredited investors. And it's kind of like a message board, basically, where you post your deck, you post your financials, and people that have gone through this vetting process on the Circle Up side are eligible to make investments into your business. And the first 10, 15 checks that came into Rumpl were very small, anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 investment checks from largely complete strangers, people that I met on the internet. And, there's still a couple of people actually that are investors in Rumpl that I've never met. I've talked to them many times, obviously, over the years, but like we've never met face to face because I literally just met them on Circle Up. And so we had this really, really good account representative on the Circle Up side. And he kind of gave me a crash course about how to talk to investors, what metrics to focus on, how to craft a pitch. It was almost like a mini investment banker that helps a business transact or sell, where the investment bankers kind of help you craft what are the valuable metrics that an investor or buyer might want to see. And he really helped me with that. So we did tons of back and forth iterations on the deck and what we were actually pitching. And he really kind of coached me into creating a attractive investment vehicle for a lot of these completely random strangers, investors that I was, trying to collect money from. So that's the first pool of people in the cap table.
I'm assuming that most investors probably don't care about marketing or brand at all. They're really looking for something else. What are those things that you mentioned that that's what that person was trying to help you show. What are those metrics that made the most difference for you?
I think like we just had really impressive early traction. Whether or not someone was doubtful of the eventual vision that we were casting in this presentation or this investor deck, it was like you couldn't really deny the early traction. And that's something that, as I look back in hindsight, like we were very fortunate to have that. I think a lot of people try to raise money for their idea and they don't have that proof of concept that was as strong as ours. I mean, it was indisputable for ours. Our first year in business, it was $500,000 in revenue. Second year was $1 million. Like clear projections for year 3 were 2 million. And so it was just like, it was actually pretty easy to get interest. There was some skepticism and pushback on addressable market and total opportunity size, but that was actually relatively easy to kind of speak to and be convincing based on the early traction we had. So I would say that was like the number one thing that people latched onto when they were first looking at Rumpl as an investment. Year
over year growth is never a bad one. That was one of the other conversations we were having on the Hollow interview with Brian. He said sales fixes everything. Definitely opens the door for these kind of conversations to sort of come through. But when you take investment, when you have people on a cap table, that must also introduce other stuff, right? So there's you have to provide additional information. There's sometimes like a board of directors that comes in, and so you get more than just cash. Now you have responsibilities to investors. What was that like, learning yet another thing on top of this? Because by this point, you've sort of figured out production, you've figured out design, you've figured out retail and sales, but now you got to add another thing to the whole process, which is sort of required in exchange for money. What was that sort of learning curve like?
Yeah, I mean, really good question. And it really wasn't required, actually. I kind of just put myself in the shoes of the people that gave us money. I was like, what would I want to know from this, mostly stranger entrepreneur that I had just invested $10,000 in? And so I ended up starting this quarterly report cadence where every quarter I whip up a little investor report, and it gives kind of highlights of how we perform financially to plan, cool things we're working on for the future, just our outlook for the business in the future, just general overview of kind of like market conditions, competition, where we were seeing traction, where we were seeing roadblocks. A lot of the time, I've since reformatted this a little bit, but it's basically like this kind of three box report where it's like, what were our assumptions when I last spoke to you? What ended up happening? And what are we doing to, actually navigate with those new realities? And that just provides clarity to the investors. And I have no real obligation to do this. I'm not legally required to do this. It's more just like if I want to give people information that they can use to feel good about their investment, or frankly, if I want to quiet down inquiry out of those reporting cycles, I just provide this report. And like Brian said, sales fix a lot of things. So we had good sales, and I just didn't get a huge amount of pushback and inquiry on what we were doing because we were tracking so well to plan. So it was a new skill, but it wasn't hard for me to kind of grasp what was needed to make people. Ultimately, what we were trying to do is make people feel comfortable with their investment for the first few years. Feel good about making that investment.
I feel like athletes could probably steal this exact same format for their sponsors, because it's almost identical, right? Like you've got somebody who's invested in you and wants to know what you're up to and how you're making use of their support. And, the things you're referencing, maybe it's social numbers, maybe it's race results, maybe it's something along those lines. But I feel like a lot of people don't do this, but the quarterly report is underrated, I think. To your point too, about sort of quelling those conversations and making people feel comfortable and confident in what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's not that hard, especially if you kind of templatize it and you say like, this is the template. And I've shared with investors as I roll out new amendments to the template or shift it up. It's like, this is now how this is going to look moving forward. This is what you can expect over the next couple reports. And it's not that hard to do. I mean, I can usually whip these things up in an afternoon and and it gives people the information they need to feel comfortable with it. And yeah, to your point, I feel like this is applicable for athletes, for a whole bunch of people that are relying on capital sourcing outside of their own pocket. So if you're a public company or a much larger company, obviously that requirement becomes much more intense, and you need a lot more scrutiny on it. But at the early days, if you're just taking some seed capital, like just giving people an update on what you're doing and what you're trying, that's all that people I think are really looking for. And to some extent, you may like have a call to action, like we could use help in these areas. Anybody that's got experience with this, please reach out. But it's just keeping them involved, I would say, is all they're looking for.
This is a perfect transition into the next question I want to ask you, because I've got to imagine that it's nice to get a check from somebody on the internet that you've never met in real life. But there are obviously people out there who are experts in certain fields who also have money to put on the table, who can also sort of put their thumb on the scale for the success of your business, who've maybe been where you were, the Wylie that's 10 years ahead of you, that could come in and sort of support and help and guide. Did you try to sort of identify those people in addition to the people you were meeting on Circle Up? How did you think about building mentors sort of into the business?
That's a really good question. I would say that we've just been really lucky with the people we've been introduced to. Two funding rounds later from this early one I'm talking about, now our lead investor is White Road Investments, and they are the family fortune of Kit and Gary Erickson, the founders of Cliff Bar. And, they know entrepreneurship, they know the outdoor space, they know the ups and downs, they know it, and they're just good people. And so we've been really lucky to have some super strong people come into the business just through introductions, through interest in what we're doing. But I would say, if we didn't kind of have that good fortune, I think it's a balance. I mean, you want people that know your business and understand the space, but you also want to have the flexibility and the freedom to be able to make decisions without a heavy hand. I think that if you find someone that's just perfectly calibrated to exactly what you're doing, sure, bring them in, create a board with them, and follow their lead if you don't know what's going on or if you need that guidance. But a lot of time, I think it's also really valuable to have passive capital. People that just say, "Hey, I like your product," or I like you as an entrepreneur, whatever it may be, and I want to put money in to fund this, but I'm going to be kind of hands up. I think that's also really valuable. So I don't have like a clear cut answer for this. I think it just depends on who the entrepreneur is and what the idea is and how well they know that space, how clear their map is for the future. But there's value to both. There's value to hands on and hands off.
Okay, well, related to investment, you were on Shark Tank, and we're on this roadmap of good decision, bad decision. How did the Shark Tank appearance impact Rumpl overall? Positive, negative? Were you glad you did it? Complete waste of time?
I'm glad I did it. I mean, I don't love being characterized as like a Shark Tank brand, quote unquote, because
sure.
we were a business before we did that. But I'm glad I did it more on the personal side than on the business side. It did help the business for sure. I mean, I think we got a lot of exposure. There was a lot of fast inbound interest. It also created a lot of noise, right? Like there's a whole bunch of inquiry from retailers and people that we just didn't necessarily want to work with. If you're on Shark Tank, you're going to immediately get like QVC inquiries and big box retail inquiries and things that you may not be ready for or want to do right then. So there is noise that it creates. But overall, it was a super fun personal experience. I mean, I've never been on like a big, huge production set like that. Hot lights, hot mic, makeup, like the whole thing. So that was just like a cool life experience for me to have, and I recommend people do it. It's like a huge adrenaline rush to do that, and so I enjoyed it on the personal side. On the business side, yeah, it definitely created some opportunity for Rumpl, and just going back to how it came about, I think is sort of interesting. So
yeah, I'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah, Shark Tank has become like a pretty, I mean, it's obviously a very established show, but it's become like a real avenue for people to pursue if they want to get their ideas off the ground. This is not just like napkin sketch, like we'll see what happens. I mean, it's like there are real case studies of businesses that have scaled and become very big businesses that started with their Shark Tank introduction. So what the producers of Shark Tank like to do is they like to have kind of a split of like, napkin sketch, pre-revenue, just pure idea, and established businesses that actually need additional capital to scale, because that continues to build the momentum around the show as like this real place where real businesses go and grow from there. So Shark Tank had actually approached Rumpl many times in the past to be on. And basically I was like, I don't think I want to do this. I was intimidated, to be frank. I was intimidated to go on to this like full TV set and do this whole thing. But Rumpl actually had its first down year in 2019. And at the time I was like, man, what can we do to like really bolster some attention and kind of like jumpstart this thing? And by the way, the reason why we had this down year is we had a huge corporate order come in 2018. It was like a $3 million corporate order that just didn't recur. And so it was very, very tough to comp that order. And anyway, long story short, I was like, I got to do something to kind of like re-engage this business and get some energy back into it. And as an entrepreneur, like everybody will know, like you'll do anything to do that for your business. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm just going to go on Shark Tank, and I don't want to do this, but I'll do it. And anyway, so I did it in 2020, the year after. And all that required was me just reaching back to the people that had emailed me several times asking if I wanted to be on, and just say, okay, yeah, I'm ready to do this. And so we kind of got like moved right to the front of the line. I didn't really have to audition or anything. And they immediately started coaching you on your intro thing. Like, you go up and you do your little rehearsed line by line thing about what your product is. That's the only part that's scripted in Shark Tank. And the rest is completely free form. But yeah, that's how it happened. And I basically just bit the bullet and said, okay, I'm going to do this. And here we are.
I think the hardest part about being on Shark Tank would be being forced to do public math as they're throwing percentages and rates and whatever at you, like as the lights are on and as the cameras are on. Did you have sort of going into it, did you have an idea of what you have to like say, oh, I want this percent for this chunk. But were you walking into this thinking, I'm not going to take probably whatever they're offering, or like, yeah, maybe Mark Cuban's going to plunk down a couple $1 million and we're off to the races? Like, where were you mentally as you're sort of walking out into, this stage thinking about, well, this is a turning point for the business potentially, or this is just great publicity? But did you walk into it thinking that it was going to come out?
I had an ask, and I was willing to go kind of like minus 10% of that ask. We didn't get anywhere close to that. They basically came in at like minus 50% of my ask. So right off the bat, I was just like, okay, this is not going to get to where I want it to go. I did specifically want to work with Mark Cuban because the whole reason, the pitch I had there was we were just getting into sports licensing. And I had a whole team working on Rumpl that was really focused on like outdoor distribution, outdoor brand, outdoor consumer, and sports licensing, and sales in stadium was like a completely different sales channel, margin profile, everything. And so there was a real need from our end to actually get capital infused into the business to do this, build the team out to do this. And Cuban specifically would have been awesome for that with his involvement with the Mavs and everything. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The math was really hard. I definitely rehearsed this. Like I definitely had just the numbers in the back of my mind, but they throw out all sorts of curveballs, royalties and payback structures. And you do have to think kind of on the fly. But like I said, it's just such an adrenaline rush when you're out there. You kind of like switch on and you just feel like, okay, I got my numbers. You're super focused and present. And I think I did all right in terms of math, because that's not my strong suit. And, and I think I didn't like soil myself on stage there and completely blow it. So I'm pleased with how I performed, I guess, on Shark Tank. But yeah, it's super nerve wracking, and you do need to do just live math calculation.
The thing that really strikes me as interesting is that, going back to, before Shark Tank, you were saying you had this $3 million order, which obviously like shows up as growth in the company. But then if it's a one-time thing, you're already down $3 million in the projected growth for the following year. And it's not necessarily that you lost money, that you like booked another $3 million worth of inventory or anything along those lines, but it's just this need to always show constant growth and stuff that sort of puts you in the crosshairs of this situation. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what is that experience like, not necessarily growth at all costs, but just, how most people be like, oh my God, I got a $3 million PO. Like, let's go. But
Yeah.
actually something like that puts you in a position where it's like, well, now I have to grow more than $3 million next year if this doesn't come back. Can you talk a little bit more about, how you sort of handle that, or how you think about that stuff, and sort of the interesting position it kind of puts you in? Like, you need to show growth specifically for the investors, or, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I didn't need to show any growth for investors. It was my own miscalculation, and frankly, I was just really naive. Like I didn't foresee that. Of course, that order wouldn't comp. It was a corporate order where they were buying 20,000 units for 20,000 employees, and that was great as a revenue spike for us. But there's no way I should put that sale on our comp for the subsequent year. And I was just really green and didn't really realize that. What ended up happening is our revenue dropped about $1 million from prior year. So we actually did comp $2 million of that 3 million that we had got the year prior. So we actually did grow all of our recurring sales channels. And so it was just me being really green and not quite realizing that I just need to think about the P&L the next year differently. And we bolted on additional expenses and resources against that comp number. And so what ended up happening is when we didn't meet that comp, we took our first loss, and we had just saddled the business up with more expenses, expecting growth on top of that one-time revenue pop. And so this was just like a classic. I mean, this is year 4 or 5 or something. I should have known better, to be totally honest. Someone at the company should have known better, but we didn't. We were all pretty green and pretty naive to this, and we just made a mistake. That was a big mistake we made, and I think that people can probably avoid that mistake really easily if they just look at the customer profile of who's providing that big revenue pop, and ask themselves very plainly, very simply, like, is there a likelihood that this order is going to recur the next year? And in our case, it should have been obvious. No, it's not going to recur. You shouldn't comp this next year. All of our other channels that were recurring, REI, website, whatever, those all grew, and we just saw an overall revenue decline because this one customer didn't come back, which is totally normal for an order like that.
So you had this year over year growth and exponential in the early days, and I'm sure continue to grow quickly. You've taken investment from some pretty established investors at this point. Have there been moments where you've had the opportunity to sell the business, and how have you thought about being in that scenario where you could just take all the money off the table in one shot? I mean, is that some people really love just running the business and the day-to-day of it and whatever. Other people are like, going back to that previous podcast, he's like, I've thought about it 4,000 times this morning already,
Yeah.
Where do you fall on that spectrum of, hey, we built this thing up, but I'm sure people have been sniffing around since day one.
Yeah. A couple topics on that question. I mean, I got really close to selling the business in 2021. And we had just grown, 300% over prior year. Like, it was and the market was so frothy with M&A at that time. It would have been actually the perfect time to sell. And I kind of missed the window, to be totally frank. I saw what 22 was looking like, and we were going to grow a ton again. Our pre-books were super up. And I assumed that the market conditions that we were in 21, this is like peak COVID, when people were buying tons of stuff and M&A valuations were super high. I assumed that those conditions would continue. Again, this is just like being really naive and not having a long time frame to look back on and a lot of historical context. But I got really close to selling it. I do ultimately want to transact Rumpl. I'm just in a different spot now with my engagement with the business. I hired a general manager about a year ago, and that has been awesome. And I get to focus on kind of front of house stuff, creative partnerships, collabs, artist things. And I really like doing that. So if I can still be motivated and excited and inspired by the work that we're doing, I definitely want to stick at it and keep doing it. It's a great little swim lane for me to be in. It was managing, legal compliance and HR and forecasting and S&OP and like all these other things that the business needs to run. that were just like really weighing on me. They're not my, natural resting place, and they're not like what I'm particularly good at. So I felt a huge amount of imposter syndrome doing the CEO job for the, kind of 3-4 years before hiring this general manager. And every topic was just felt over my head. So there's just like this huge amount of kind of like sprinting to keep up with just the general pace of the business growth. And hiring a seasoned general manager has been such a big mental unlock for me to just kind of rest and focus on the things that I actually can add real value to. So I would say if you are a founder and you've found yourself in this situation, or your business has scaled, and what started as a cool product idea or a cool go-to-market concept that you have now results in you managing the full back end of a business, and people management and performance reviews and HR and legal and all this stuff that you just didn't really foresee having to do. Hiring someone like a general manager or like an integrator in an EOS structure, something like that, can really like re-energize you with the business, as it has done for me. So I would recommend that if you get to a place where you can do it.
It sounds like you wish you would have done this a couple of years even
sure.
earlier.
Totally.
I mean, that's a really interesting question, I think, also of when to hire people, how to hire people. I mean, you've obviously hired a lot of people over the last decade or so to come in and hold various jobs. You were essentially forced into it in the earliest days because there was already so much demand and you needed to fulfill and do the thing. But how have you thought about scaling the business and hiring and sort of managing the workforce of Rumpl over the last decade?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is the people, this is cliche, but the people inside the business completely make or break the business's success. And they completely make or break if it's a nice place to work. So, great hires are awesome. Keep those people at all costs, and bad hires, like, get them out of there as fast as possible. And, that's hard to do, especially we've invested time and energy and resources recruiting someone. If they don't work out, it's kind of like, oh man, you just don't want to believe it. But if you know it, you got to move on that instinct. So anyway, yeah, how I think about hiring people is, first and foremost, do we want to work with this person? Do we want to be shoulder to shoulder with them 40 plus hours a week? And, that's just like purely personality, style, all that, completely independent of if they can do the job. And so I've made some mistakes in the past where I've hired people that have great credentials. I know they can do the job, but they're a total pain in the ass to work with. And so, and it's taken me like a lot of misfires to really learn that. And we still do it sometimes. But it's the most important thing that you can get right or wrong. I mean, we're 12 years in, it's still the most important thing to get right or wrong.
What about headcount specifically, though? Like, when do you know when it's time to add a GM, for example, which you just did, or a director of marketing or director of, is there a signal that you're getting as the business is growing that you're like, it's time for more people? Or is it sort of just like, it feels right?
It's a tough call. I mean, there's like all sorts of metrics you can look at if you want to do it that way. I mean, revenue per head, headcount as a percentage of revenue, all those things you can look at and you can be formulaic with it. But I think more than anything, it comes down to just feel like, does the person in charge of this function have it? Do they have what it takes? Do they have the vision for the next 5 years of growth? Or do we need to support them in some way, or bring someone on top of them and actually have them become kind of the leader of a function? For me specifically with the GM one, it's all those things I just mentioned, like just feeling kind of over my head, over my ski tips with a lot of these decisions, and just the level of complexity that the business got to, and having to learn like every new thing that we were doing in the moment was just really taxing on me. So that was like very much a feel. I mean, our board didn't ask for it or anything like that. That was something I brought to the board, which at first they were actually pretty resistant to. Because, Rumpl had ups and downs, and I had effectively navigated through all those. And it was way more just like, hey, I am feeling completely over my skis right now, and I need someone to support this. So I would say it's some combination of qualitative and quantitative evaluation, but I think the qualitative one usually trumps the quantitative one.
I want to sort of land the plane with this whole thing. And just now that, you're in this position where you have a little bit more time to take a deep breath and to sort of look back at everything, how is thinking back to your original vision of what you wanted Rumpl to be, what is it? If you look at it right now, where is it on that? Is it well beyond? Is it sort of what you expected it to be when you were sitting there in your San Francisco apartment thinking about the future of this Kickstarter campaign? Where'd you land?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had a real vision for the business when we were doing the Kickstarter thing. It was like, do people want this? So we're definitely in excess of that. I would say that the vision I have for the business in the future is it's pretty far off from that right now. So there's a lot of work to do, and I feel like, especially with the help of a good leadership team, like it becomes really inspiring to kind of map to that, to bridge to that strategically, and figure out what you need to do to get there. I would say we can see some early signs of where I see the business going. But I would say first and foremost, it's like new category creation. Every product we come out with, we want it to be really new, novel, add value beyond what's out there already. Like Rumpl is not going to do puffy jackets. I'll just say that right now. Like there's so many good puffy jackets out there. We're not going to compete there. That category, I don't think needs a huge amount of innovation. Like it's in a pretty good spot. So most of the things that we look at, it's like, can we add real value here? And there's some pretty exciting products we have in our roadmap that I think do that. So I'm really excited about that. And then the real area which I'm most excited to be touching again is just the art and color and print design aspect of the company. And that was a part that I kind of took a little bit of a step back on over the last 8 years because I was just managing all the back end and all the other stuff of the business. But now with our GM, it's like I can really be all over that. And so the first season that I've had my hands all over for many years is our spring 27 season. So it's not even in the market yet. Mm-hmm. And then I think fall 27 builds on that. And I think spring 28 will build on that. And it's like just getting a lot closer to the art and color and creative process purely on surface design, not even silhouette design, but just getting Rumpl to be known as like this hub for creativity where artists want to come and put their work on the canvas and show it in this new light. I think that's like a big part of the vision I have for the company.
Okay, bonus question then. So these collaborations, these artists that are coming in, I love the look of so many of the stuff that you guys have already put out, but is that a business play or is that a brand play? Where are those collaborations making the biggest impact for you?
It's a brand play for sure. I mean, we intentionally don't buy a lot of units in these artists and collab partnerships. Like we want them to sell out quickly. Mm-hmm. But that's fuel. That's like what brings people back to our website. What keeps people interested in the brand is, Rumpl just did this cool new thing, and they go and check it out. It may not be for them, and they end up buying the blue one or something like that. But that's the stuff that I think is exciting. That's where there's like really rich storytelling beyond what the story you've already told about the blue one.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I pay attention to when I look at brands, honestly. Like if I buy a brand's hero product, I've got the product, but I'll still pay attention to the brand because they're doing cool stuff. And so it's totally a brand play. And we've actually gotten into trouble when we've tried to make those volume plays and tried to make them revenue drivers. It doesn't do the same thing. It doesn't do the right thing. So definitely brand.
Very cool. Awesome. Wylie, thank you for this. I feel like there's a lot of little golden nuggets sprinkled through this conversation that, a lot of people are thinking about this entrepreneurial journey. A lot of people are on the journey currently. A lot of people are really looking for guidance. And I feel like you dropped a lot of really solid knowledge. I doubt many people are going to end up on Shark Tank or putting their products into space, but there's still plenty of actionable stuff here that a lot of people could take inspiration from and kind of run through. Is there any sort of last minute wisdom that you want to share with people that are on the journey, that are just like in it right now, trying to find that product market fit or trying to just like work through getting, the business built up to support the product market fit that they've maybe found already?
Yeah, it's kind of, I would say it's similar to what I said at the top of the recording here, where it's like, do something that you understand really well. Like, don't try to learn something new and then bring it to market and figure that out. I really think that can set people up for failure and failure by way of being inauthentic, because you don't actually understand the core thing you're trying to do as well as maybe your audience might. And so my piece of advice is pretty consistent that I give to people when they ask me this. It's just like, do something that you understand really well. And it's simple, but it's simple advice that served me really well.
Very cool. Well, we end every episode with a segment called Brand Product Content, BPC. You're the guest, so I'm going to let you go first. A brand that you've discovered or a product you're using, piece of content you love?
Yeah. It's not related to the content, but I'm sure you have one of these things, Lucy. It's the Kids Ride Shotgun bike seat. And maybe your kids are older than this now, but I've got 2 young kids, 4 and 6. And, going from 0 kids to 1 kid is like a completely tectonic shift in your lifestyle and your priorities and everything. And this shotgun seat, I'm a mountain biker for anyone listening, but that allowed me to stay on the bike, spend quality time with my boys, and I've had some of the best memories on the bike with them sitting on that little seat in front of me. And it's by far the best kid product for me that we bought. And it allowed me to feel like myself with this new identity. And so I love that brand. I love the product. Dan, the CEO, is a good dude. And if you're into biking and you're about to have a kid, get yourself the Kids Ride Shotgun.
That's cool. I've seen them. I missed the window a little bit on it with my kiddos.
They're new.
Yeah. I think also like one of the sort of benefits that comes with it is that the kids get used to like the speed that you ride mountain biking, because I think that was actually one of the hardest things for me to sort of teach my kids. Like if you go faster, it gets easier, but they weren't comfortable at speed. So it was really hard to sort of teach that lesson where if they're riding with you like that, not that you're like panning it through the woods with a kid on your top tube, but they at least get used to like the average speed that you would ride a bicycle. And I think that just sort of in the back of their head, having that in there probably helps them over that first hurdle as they're sort of developing their riding skills, I think.
Totally. It's like a pre-strider step, actually, which is interesting. Yeah, I love that product.
That's so cool. That's so cool. I love being able to share the sport that you love with the kids. My version of that is basically I've got one of those toe straps that I put on that e-bike and then put around the kids' handlebars so I can rip them up big hills and then we can bomb down together. So,
well, now I've got the 4-year-old on the shotgun and the towie for the 6-year-old.
That's amazing.
So I'm just like full carpool guy up the hill.
That's amazing. Okay, my BPC, it's mine, but it's also related to a brand that both you and I know and love. I made a factory tour with Chris King, and I just want to shout out Chris King because I have been wanting to make that video for a very long time, just to show the rest of the world what we've all collectively seen. And this brand makes some of the best, if not the best, and most precise bike parts of all time. But the way that they do it is the thing that I really wanted to show. It's how they recycle all of the cutting oil over and over and over again, how they take all the offcuts and recycle them down into these big aluminum pucks. There was other stuff in the video that I just couldn't fit it all in because there was so much that this company does to sort of be really thoughtful in the way that they engineer and create everything. And I was just blown away at that level. And I think everybody that's seen the video since I put it out has as well. So Chris King is actually having their 50th anniversary this year, 50 years in business making bike parts, which is a huge milestone for anybody in business. But then also just the way that they go about it. It's American manufacturing. They do everything in-house. And I mean, that was the first bike part I actually saved up my own money to buy. And in the video, I have like a photo of me holding a check from McDonald's, and whatever. And then also like an old photo of me riding like the first bike part. Man, to see the behind the scenes of how it comes together and how much thought goes into like building a product, it's just staggering. So I'm shouting out a little combination of B and C here, brand Chris King, but content, this factory tour video that we just made. Those guys deserve all the, accolades that they've gotten over the last 50 years. It's just incredible product. And the crew there, it's just a bunch of good dudes. So no complaints.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you'll appreciate this. So I also have, I've probably had it for 15 or 20 years. It's a King 1 1/8 inch straight steer tube headset.
Ooh.
And I'm like, man, I'm going to use this on some bike someday. Like they don't even make straight steer tubes anymore, but the cups feel great. They're smooth. And I'm like, I'm not getting rid of this thing. I have no other parts, by the way, to like build a bike up from this genre, but the King headset I'm keeping in my parts bin.
And that was like my dream. I mean, it was on every dream build from the dawn of time, basically, of like everybody had that headset. And it was like,
totally,
you didn't have a pro level bike unless you had a Chris King headset. And yeah, it's iconic, I think.
Totally.
Yeah, amazing brand. Definitely, if you haven't heard of this company, you need to go take a look. And I'll provide all the links to all this stuff in the show notes. Everybody can go check it out. But yeah, big props to those guys. I mean, 50 years doing anything is pretty incredible. Wylie, thank you so much for being on. I think there's a lot to take away from this discussion for everybody listening. A lot of inspiration, a bit of a roadmap for them to, really think critically about how they're building their businesses along the way. Thank you so much for being on, and continued success, man. I'm excited to see where this continues to go.
Thanks. And thanks for having me, and congrats on this podcast. Also, I really like it. I told you before the recording started, this is the first podcast I've asked to be on. And because I just really like what you and Dylan are doing. And I think that it's really authentic too. Like, both you guys are legit participants in the cultures that you're talking about. And I think that that's really cool. And thanks for having me on. Hopefully I didn't blow it.
No, you did great. I'm really happy that we got a chance to connect on the pod, and obviously we get to hang out in real life, but it was so fun having you on and having this conversation. This has been a really good one.
Awesome. Thank you.